Welcome to Boswell Book Company's virtual event series. It is day 4,433 of us being in business, and we are so honored to be hosting Stephen Rowley, the author of The Guncle, Lily and the Octopus, and the editor. The Guncle has won raves from many reviewers, including PW, who called the book heartwarming and hilarious, delightful and illuminating, and Helen McAlpin notes in Christian Science Monitor as demonstrated in Lily and the Octopus. And the editor, Rowley, knows how to tug heartstrings. In The Guncle, he doesn't just flirt with sentimentality, he invites it to move right in, and fortunately, it's a beautiful home in Palm Springs. We are so honored to be having this conversation with Christina Clancy, who brought Stephen Rowley's book to our attention. You know, it might be Rowley, and I apologize for that. I'm the worst pronouncer in the world, and all apologies. And if your name is pronounced wrong by me, it's a true honor. And so, but she championed this book and convinced me to read it, and I loved it as much as she did. And so we are just thrilled to have this happen. But that's not a good enough introduction. So I am now giving you Christina Clancy, who's going to give you an even better one. Take it away, Christina.
Oh, hey, thank you so much, Daniel. I feel so proud of my hometown bookstore. And so this is really a true pleasure to introduce not just Stephen to Boswell, but also to everyone who's signing in. I see a lot of people from different locations. You can type in and say where you're zooming in from. But one thing I just want to say is, you know, it's been a hard year for booksellers. And even if you've already bought a copy of the Guncle elsewhere, buy a book from Boswell. They have a great website. Daniel will be posting links. You can pre-order my book. You can get a book, but to help support this wonderful bookstore and Daniel's hard work. They've been great. So I just wanted to say I'm wearing a caftan today. And Steve loaned it to me, and Stephen, you're wearing a caftan too, right?
It's part of the Stephen Rowley collection from Caftco.
I'm even wearing a bathing suit under it. And I'm glad
You're
I am.
right. I tried to look a little authorial under my. People may be tuning in confused, thinking I'm the math professor from tomorrow night because I have this college cert. Anyone who's expecting a conversation about math, that's tomorrow night.
You're in the wrong place.
Although, if we could get Sebastian Younger in a caftan, that is something I would pay to see right there. So.
Okay, all right. I'm on that.
We have a week to work that out.
Yeah, it's Stephen, it's such a pleasure to have you here. And I just have a couple things I want to say before I get started, because I'm always afraid that I'll forget. But one is, first of all, thank you everyone for signing in. I know there's a lot of talk among my writer friends about Zooms, and Stephen and I were joking around about, you know, in our video that we were posting saying not another Zoom, but really Zooms have gotten us through this year. It's how we're finding out about a lot of great books. We appreciate your time to Zoom with us. And so that's wonderful that you're here. So thank you so much for signing in. And I also am just, I wanted to say, Stephen, when we set this up, I didn't realize at the time that today is Pride Day. So happy Pride
the
Day.
first day of Pride. So happy Pride, everybody. Yay.
Yes, cheers. I wish I had my drink, but I'm going to drink with you later. So
okay.
I'll tell you that. So I wanted to say that. And then also, I love events that are just a little bit more conversational and chatty. So I hope you guys will feel comfortable chiming in, asking questions. Brett Jarvis, I know you plan to heckle Stephen. You can do that in chat. So please feel free to jump in if you have questions. I'll talk for a little bit, or we'll both talk. I'll ask questions, and then we will jump over to our Q&A. So don't worry.
Absolutely. We would rather talk about what you want to talk about. And if you're going to heckle, bring it on.
Bring it.
Keep me on my toes.
Yeah. It's, so Stephen, I'm just going to quickly just say how I met you, because I think it's kind of fun to hear how authors meet each other. Mm-hmm. So I was in Palm Springs last year, right before my pre-tour started, right before the pandemic also set in. Like, we were hearing about it in China, but I wasn't really that mindful of it at the time. And Julia Claiborne Johnson, whose book is up above me, I'll show you guys in a minute. I'm kind of afraid to stand up because I've got my bathing suit on under this, and you guys
you're doing the caftan the way it's intended to be done. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But Julia said, you have to meet my friend Stephen. He is so wonderful, and he and his partner Byron live in Palm Springs, and So Stephen and I made plans to meet up, and we met. I was nervous to meet you because I knew what a big book you had. And so we went to this restaurant, and you looked amazing. You had on this like amazing outfit and your cool glasses. And I was like, whoa, I got to step it up. So anyway, we just started talking. And then before we knew it, Byron came in and joined our fun. And Byron, it turned out, had a book coming
And your
out
husband, and we were John. Yeah, it just became a party that night. Yeah, and we were determined, I think, from the get-go to be friends.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Byron also had a book called The Star is Born that you guys will want to check out. It came out last summer also. And Byron used to be the assistant to Carrie Fisher. So it's a fictionalized account of that. And it's really, really fun. So, and then in just a little aside, and Stephen, you could probably tell the story better, but just to kind of get us started, my favorite anecdote is that in the back of Byron's book, in the acknowledgement section, he proposed to you.
That's right, he did. I thought I knew that book backwards and forwards. You know, living with another writer, we lean on each other. We're each other's first readers. We give notes on various drafts, support, all kinds of things. But I thought I knew that book from front cover to back cover. But he snuck in 4 extra words at the very end of the acknowledgments. Will you marry me? So if anybody read Byron's book and was dying to know how that turned out, in the acknowledgments for the Guncle, there's an answer to that proposal. So this is like the longest lead time between perhaps proposal and answer. But if anyone who wants to eavesdrop on our relationship, you can keep doing it through the acknowledgments of our book. I don't know how we're going to top it. We're going to have to announce if we're having kids or not in the next book or something. I have no idea where you take it from here, but spoiler alert, it worked out.
Yeah, if you follow Stephen, he's great on social media, which is funny. I want to talk about that because there's a lot of references to social media in your book too. But if you follow Stephen's Instagram, there's lots of pictures of your amazing Palm Springs wedding. So I'm really excited for you. And I guess
it was amazing, except that no one was there. It was a pandemic wedding. So it was an amazing Palm Springs elopement. Everybody but guests.
Think of all the conflict you avoided. So Stephen, maybe this is a good time for me to tell you something. So in my book that's coming out in July, Shoulder Season.
Which I've read and it's great and you can pre-order now.
Yeah, you can but so there's a couple in the prologue that are at the art museum and they're meeting with Sherry, who's an event planner. And I changed the names from the galley to the final. So when you get the final, it's Stephen and Byron. So you guys are in my book. So the conversation continues.
We're a real literary couple. Wow, that's quite a tribute. Thank you. Yeah. That is really such a joy. That is such a joy.
Eggs when you read a book and you find a little something that the author hid in it. So great. Well, I want to talk about the Guncle, because I absolutely love this book. And my day started with you, Stephen, because I was on Twitter this morning and I saw a tweet from Amy Jo Burns, whose book Shiner is amazing, if you're looking for something to read. And she tweeted something that Linda Ronstadt said when she heard Emmylou Harris for the first time. And she said, I could be jealous or I could be a slobbering fan. I thought, this is exactly how I feel about your book. I could be jealous, but I'm just a huge slobbering fan of the Guncle. And also your other books too. But right now, the Guncle is just so present in my mind. And I just reread it, which was such a pleasure. And it's just got a little bit of everything. And I wonder if you could just start out by telling us the origin story and basically a summary of what the book is about. Sometimes we forget to even do that when we do these Zooms because we get so excited. So.
Yeah, well, it's like an amalgamation of a couple of things. I know this could just be like happy hour for us where we could just chat and gossip forever. But the Guncle was inspired by a number of things. One, a long-held fascination with Auntie Mame, both the Patrick Dennis novel from 1955, and then it was a Rosalind Russell Broadway show, and then a movie with Russell, and then a Broadway musical with Angela Lansbury, and a movie musical with a kind of a miscast Lucille Ball. It's a bit of a mess. But I've loved that. I've loved Mary Poppins, Sound of Music. That's stories where there's sort of a magical caretaker that comes into kids' lives and is able to fix something that is missing. And then on top of that, I am a Guncle myself. I guess really we should probably backtrack and say, and just in case anyone's not familiar with the term, it has become quite popular slang in the past 5-10 years for a gay uncle But usually more than that, a gay uncle with a larger than life sort of persona, a la an Auntie Mame figure or whatnot. And you know, the jumping off point for this was really when my brother brought his two boys to come visit a couple of years ago in Palm Springs, where I now live full time. I was a part-time resident then, a weekender, and he brought them to my Palm Springs house for a week of swimming and fun in the desert. And after about 12 hours, he was called back to the East Coast where he lives. He's a trial attorney. He was called into court to try a case, and he left me with his two boys for the for that week. And so I documented that week on social media, and it was my very wise editor, who I think is here tonight, who was following along on Instagram and said, you know, there might be something to write about in this week. And so I did. I sort of started imagining this story as a light comedic novel about a mishap that leaves a Guncle with his nephews, or niece and nephew in the case of this book. But soon after I started writing, I lost one of my closest friends from college to breast cancer, and she left behind a 6-year-old son. So suddenly the light comedic novel I was imagining was not so light, because it got me thinking about grief in children in a very different and much more realistic way. And I knew from that moment that I couldn't just, Mame had sent her nephew off to boarding school and it sort of sidestepped the issue of him being an orphan. But I knew that I couldn't do that. And hopefully the book is all the better for what is both a serious exploration of grief and something that's very, very funny, hopefully, because I find stories that really marry humor and heartache, that those are the ones that resonate with me.
Well, and you really do handle that well, because a lot of books will start out as one thing and then kind of the tone changes. But this book maintains the tone throughout. You know it's going to go deeper, and you know it'll also go lighter. But it was really nice to see how skillfully you managed that tone. And I think, especially, you and I were chatting about this the other day, that it's a really perfect book for right now, when we're all coming out of what was a really dark time. I mean, maybe some people had the time of their life last year, but
it wasn't us.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you had to use some gallows humor to get through it. Although I wouldn't describe your humor in your book as gallows humor, but it.
No, although sometimes it's dark humor. But I'm not the first person to notice that comedy and tragedy are sort of two sides of the same coin. And as you mentioned, so the book centers around Patrick O'Hara, who is a sort of a retired television star who's living a very reclusive life in Palm Springs when he's tasked with taking in his niece and nephew for the summer after the death of their mother. And it sort of brings about a season of healing for all three of them, because he's someone who is processing, or should we say probably not processing, his own grief, which is why he leads a very reclusive life. So writers have, the best of intentions in telling a story, but the one thing we have absolutely no control over is world events when the book actually comes out. And you're right, there is something about this moment, about when we're all sort of emerging from a dark year and trying to rejoin life and rejoin loved ones in the world, that is kind of a unique moment, marriage of book and moment, that I wish I could say I had planned, but I don't have that much power, sadly.
Well, it's also very life affirming. It was actually after I read your book, I was watching little bits of Auntie Mame, and the line, like, just live, just live. I felt like that really sang through at the end of the book. I was like, just live, just go have some fun. And
yeah, I love that spirit of that. And like anyone who fashions themselves after, an Auntie Mame figure, Patrick has a number of bon mots, a number of witticisms that he's fashioned as sort of Guncle rules, which are sprinkled throughout the book. And some of them are silly, some of them are designed to entertain the children, but some of them have hopefully some real wisdom behind some fun turn of phrase.
Yeah, I loved all the Guncle rules there. And you said in one of your interviews, you said that there were so many that they stopped keeping track. And I was actually kind of keeping track when I was reading to see which all of them were. But I love them. And one thing that I love about the way you write about grief is not just that you write humor, and you also write these darker scenes that are really moving, but you write beautifully. And there are just a couple of lines that I found myself circling or underlining while I was reading. And one that I thought was so interesting was when you were talking about grief. And one of the characters says, Patrick says, grief orbits the heart. Some days the circle is greater. Those are the good days. You have room to move and dance and breathe. Some days the circle is tighter. Those are the hard ones. And I felt like that was a perfect description of how your book, the grief kind of orbits your book as well, where sometimes it's tight and sometimes it's loose.
Yeah, and and that was always like striking the right balance. Thank you. I love. Sometimes I'm like, oh, did I write that? And that is the like at first it takes so long to write a book, and then publishing is a long lead industry, so it could take 15 months, 18 months after you're kind of done writing the book before it comes out. And so sometimes you forget every detail that's in the book. But yeah, striking that balance between the humor and the heartbreak. And I do think this is outright the funniest book that I've ever written. And it's not because it's making light of anything. And I think that's the real challenge, as you say, is like finding a way to do humor that's not mocking, that's not cutting anyone's grief down, that's not sort of, I don't know, taking away from the story. Like, how can you use it to add to the story, to add layers and real emotional complexity? And I think the humor, it all comes from really genuine, a place of character. And it's not, it's authentic, I think, to who these three people are as they learn to relate to one another.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Patrick, because he's in a guarded state, he uses humor also to deflect,
Of course.
Seems like it's just a perfect.
Who does that? I wonder. So let's get Byron on the call right now and see if that sounds familiar. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is what I was kind of curious while I was reading the book about what the novel is arguing for. And I remember when I launched my book, The Second Home, I was on a call, and my friend Lauren Fox, who's moderating, she said, "What's the argument at the center of your book?" And I had to think about that for a minute. And I was anticipating how you might answer this, because I saw a lot of different arguments to be made. And I was curious what you see as the central argument that your book is making.
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot. But in thinking about that, and thinking about like, why do I want to make my own entry into this genre, right? So it's not, as I mentioned, Mary Poppins and Sound of Music, right down to like, John Candy and Uncle Buck or something. It's not, or Diane Keaton and Baby Boom or something, like person inheriting kids and calamity ensues. It's not original to me. So it's like, how do you do it in a way that says something new? And what I really wanted was Patrick's superpower, in making this a gay character. That Patrick's real superpowers with these kids comes from his lived experience as a gay man. So his empathy and the way he can relate to others, his sense of humor, his pop cultural references, his politics, his worldview, all comes from his lived experience as a gay man. And so we're at a crosspoint. You talked about today being the first day of Pride. Like, there are lots of gay male couples and lots of other couples, raising kids now for the first time. So, but I really wanted, I think, to argue for the validity of other viewpoints in and other life experiences in child rearing. So, it was important to me that all of Patrick's, everything came from him, came from his life and his experience. And so I think it's a real argument and a testament to reading. I always tell people, read books by authors that don't look like you or don't have the same life from you. And I just think that's a sort of a way to empathy and greater understanding, particularly, in this crazy world we live in now.
That's such a great, that does definitely totally come through in your book. And I was thinking too, as a parent, that what I was seeing is the way that Patrick's a really good influence on the kids, because he normalizes his lifestyle for the kids. Like because they come from Connecticut, maybe they hadn't had a lot of exposure to being in a community with a throuple, or for those of you who don't know what a throuple is.
Yeah, do you want to explain that one?
maybe I should leave this to you. But it's three, well, I guess men in this situation who all live together, and they're like three people in a couple. And, and you really,
safe for this broadcast, I describe it as an amorous snap, crackle, and pop.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think, but by the time, I see the kids going through the motions of being in Patrick's world, and every single encounter is positive and interesting. And then it's also just these are people, and they love each other, and they are, happy, and we can show this other not alternative, but this other way of life. In fact, it's like, it's
for
like,
sure. And that was the fun of, it is a fish out of water story a little bit. Patrick's a fish out of water with the kids are a fish out of water. Choosing Palm Springs as the setting was very deliberate. Like, it's a place we associate more where people go at the end of their lives or retirement, as opposed to raising children. And then it was interesting, just then the city itself having this like unrelenting, cheerful sunshine all the time that doesn't match the way you may feel on the inside. But so the fun thing in writing a fish out of water story is then like doing really surprising things with the fish. So, or with, I guess the metaphor would be better than doing surprising things with the ocean, the new body of water that you throw them in. So yes, there is a polyamorous relationship that are the neighbors, and they sort of provide their own wisdom and outlook, but the fun in creating those characters was giving them really something valuable to contribute and to say, and subverting expectations a little bit. And they're not there for a punchline either. And I think that's what I'm most proud of at this book, is it doesn't make fun of, anyone, and hopefully everyone, it really celebrates everyone's contributions and their value.
It's interesting. I wanted to talk to you about that because I was on a Boswell event. They had a Zoom with Katherine Heine, who wrote Early Morning Riser, and Lisa Bowden from the Books and Company in Oconomowoc. She had a really great observation where she said, in your book, in a lot of books, it feels like when characters have to take care of other characters, or maybe like that fish out of water, like there's other characters involved, they seem like they're a burden, and there's a chafing or a bristling. And I was glad I had that in my mind when I was reading your book, because I was thinking about how the characters really kind of accept each other. And I don't want to give away anything, but with the sister Clara, like she could have been presented in a very harsh, unlikable way, but instead I thought it was really interesting how Patrick had deep empathy for her. And I like the way you present your characters not as caricatures, but as real people that Patrick in particular is especially tuned into. And I think that his being in tune with other people and being forced to be around other people and their quirks and hurts and everything they bring into a relationship was part of his healing, which brings us back to this idea of your book being the perfect post-pandemic book, because we're all, we've all been encountering other people's weirdness this last year.
Yeah. So, there's very interesting relationships in this. I was just thinking of them in terms of threes. So there's Patrick and the two kids, and then there's the throuple next door, and then there's Patrick and his brother, the children's father, and his sister Clara. They're, sort of a tight threesome too. But it was interesting to explore all those dynamics, because threes are usually two against one. And so it's interesting to keep shifting that and playing with that. And then even when it's the one person out, still, they're not there just, and that sometimes is Clara in this book, in the sibling relationship, but she has a valuable point of view too. And it's just like characters learning to accept each other for who they are, and not really trying to force change upon them, but to enlighten them and get them to open up their way of thinking, on their own.
Yeah, I think that's why this book is so well received. People are just loving it. I think they can see maybe their better selves when they're reading this book, or like how we can be a better self.
I don't know what it is. The difference between doing this event and say like the couple I did last week, particularly one on publication day to celebrate that, is, a week in, I've had some early feedback on the book and have been hearing from so many wonderful readers, and everyone has been so kind and posting these, incredible things on Instagram and photos in the Bookstagram community and early reviews. I'm just really touched by people seem to be embracing it in a way that I could never have imagined. I've never felt this before. And I think it is like people need to laugh now, and people need to be reconnected with family and reemerging into the world. And I don't know, there's some bit of magic about this book right in this moment. And I'm deeply, deeply touched by everyone's kindness.
And I have to say, there are some books that really stand out as a great gift book. This book is an easy gift. You can give this book to anyone and they'll love it. Well, maybe not everyone. Maybe some people aren't quite ready for the cover. Too bad for them. But
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Tucker Carlson probably doesn't want to read it.
Yeah, but who cares about Tucker Carlson?
But it is a family book. It's a family love story. So everyone's like, I'm going to give this to my Guncle, and I'd be thrilled if you have a Guncle and you wanted to share the book with them, or your child has a Guncle. But it's a family love story. It just happens to be a modern family. So I really do think this is a book for everyone.
Yeah, but speaking of family, so I have so many questions. I don't even know. I every time I start to talk, I'm like, wait, should I ask this or this? But I just want to ask you a quick question about family. So I was thinking about your book in two ways. One is kind of like my book, The Second Home. Like Steinbeck argues that I was kind of trying to do something like what Steinbeck was doing, where he regathers the family and reconfigures it. And a family by the end of the book is much different than what we think of as the nuclear family. It is a lot of people drawn from different places, and that's one kind of family. And I was thinking that that's definitely what's happening in the Guncle. Yet I also felt this undertow of a desire on your part as the author to maybe suggest that traditional families could be better. Like that families aren't living up to what they could be and should be, but that's a loss, and that it would, I don't know, like, does that sound like something?
Yeah, you're in a weird sort of intersectionality where queer people have lived that very, very, very extensively. So, on one hand, found family has been so important. Things are changing and things are getting better for LGBTQ plus people, but for many years and decades, they were often cast out of their families. And so they had to rewrite the definition of family to be these sort of found families if they, moved to a big city, and friends became family, and these groups, and particularly, at the height of AIDS and whatnot, families, birth families, blood families were often on the outside of that, or had rejected those people. So found family became, there were no deeper ties than that. The tragedy, during something like the AIDS crisis was that, sometimes blood relations would swoop in at the last minute, and they would cast out that found family who was the real, who was the real sort of heart and soul of for these people. But because queer people are sometimes more likely to have had some issue with their family. As I said, it's getting better, and every day, and I'm so grateful for that. But it's the only minority that is also a minority within their own family. So if you're a gay person, chances are you could be the only one in your family. So you start viewing the family as a little bit, you're both an insider and an outsider, and it forces you to look at family in an entirely different way. And yes, but my criticisms of the family are similar to the larger community. I don't know why people have children just to make a sort of a mini me, and if they grow up to not look like you or act like you or have the same ambition as you, that's suddenly like hard for you to relate to them. Why does anyone think they're so great? Why I don't think I'm so great that what the world needs is another me. So it's like, celebrate individuality, celebrate everyone for their differences, and I hope that families are getting better at doing that, and I hope the world gets better at doing that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I think too, like, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the place, and how speaking of families and being kind of cast out, I think of Palm Springs as a place, a refuge for Patrick, but it's also, he's also isolated in a way, and he feels like there's this idea that he's kind of in a satellite city from Los Angeles or New York, that there are other bigger things going on that he's rejecting, but yet he's found this wonderful place at home. And I wonder if you can talk about how Palm Springs, you talked about it a little bit before, but just how Palm Springs kind of informs his sense of belonging or not.
Yeah, well, you and I share a love for Palm Springs. I hope I'm not outing you here as a native
No, totally.
Wisconsinite, but you have a love for Palm Springs too. There is something magical about this city, and I think coincidentally, Patrick loves a lot of the same things about Palm Springs that I love about Palm Springs, where it does feel away, but it's not that far away. And Patrick is likes to consider himself someone who has shut the outside world out, but he gets called out on that even by I think it's his agent or someone who was like, you didn't go that far away, Patrick. It's only 100 miles away from LA. And in fact, that's how Palm Springs became, developed as a city, is back in the old studio days, is that people were not allowed to go more. If you were under contract with the studio, if you were a performer, you couldn't go more than 100 miles away from Los Angeles as part of your contract in case you needed to be called back to be in a moving picture. And so a lot of people, fled as far as Palm Springs, and which was 100 miles. It was really sort of, towing that line, working right up to the edge of it. But it does have this Hollywood glamour too, and that sort of 1950s throwback, that mid-century feel that it's so famous for. But like it was a playground for Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe had a place here, and Liberace, and all the Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, everyone who had a place here in Palm Springs. So it does have this sort of great. It feels away, but it also, if you're sort of playing away, it's like being a kid who threatens to run away from home and then they just go as far as the corner. That's sort of how I picture Patrick as a little bit. He's like, made a tantrum and I'm going away, but he hasn't gone that far. And I think he even thinks there's more to life that he's willing to let himself admit to.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to think of everybody here as running away, but just far enough.
But just far enough, yeah.
Yeah. One thing, some of my
a
writers.
little farther from Wisconsin.
Yeah. But did you have your cheese curds?
I did. So Christy gave me cheese curds. Yeah. No, I haven't tried them yet. I meant to have them in a little bowl so I could, but no one needs. I don't need to see. I've got cheese curds.
Cheese curds, summer sausage, you did the whole works.
Yeah, there should be. I wish there was a feature we could put up here with a poll that should I try my cheese curds tonight from Christy. But I have authentic Wisconsin cheese curds.
Well, speaking of place, and one other question I have was a lot of my writer friends also wrestle with whether to set their book in a real place. And sometimes they'll make up towns, and sometimes that's great. Like sometimes that's the right decision for a book, but it's definitely not something you'd want to do. Like I love it that you have Palm Springs in incredible detail, from the names of the stars on the sidewalk to Lulu's restaurant. And I feel like you must have had so much fun writing this book and being kind of a tour guide, because I do that with my books too. And I feel like really proud of the places I write about. And I just love for other people who might not have ever been there to just kind of get a flavor. Did you enjoy?
I loved it. And apologies to all my favorite places that, that didn't make it into the book, because one day maybe I'll publish a guidebook to my Palm Springs, but, there, as you mentioned, there is this restaurant there, Lulu, which is this massive restaurant that has like an enormous, like Cheesecake Factory style menu with literally, page after page after page after page after page. And it is so funny because I've ended up eating there because I'll have someone with a gluten allergy and I'll have one vegan and I'll have kids, and they have a kids menu, and it literally covers all sins. So that's, when Patrick suddenly has to find a place like, where children want to eat too, it is, it was an easy place to reach for. But it does feel cheating at sometimes. It feels like, am I not challenging myself enough as a writer to set it in a place in which I'm so familiar? But it's such a specific place, and it's such, I have such affection for it. It was, it was irresistible not to ever write about it. I had to.
You write so beautifully about it too, and everything's included. I just found myself recognizing the experience of being here, from like that bright blinding sun to even the windstorms, like one day it's windy, to the dinosaurs, everything is in there. So if you're thinking about planning a trip to Palm Springs, definitely read your book before you come. And it's one of my readers just emailed me and said that she wanted to have an experiential book club, where I would walk
Mm.
around and show her in her book club the different places. And I was like, we should start a business doing that.
We really should. And this would be a great book for that, right? It's first of all, it's designed to be read by a pool. So absolutely. And then yeah, come to Palm Springs. We'll walk you up one side of the town and down the other and point out all the places.
Oh, it's so great here.
But it's funny to think of it as a travelogue now. The book's a travelogue, or I've gotten lovely messages from people up there. Oh, I'm becoming a Guncle this year for the first time, so I have to read your book. And I was like, oh, suddenly it's an instructional manual and a travelogue, and yeah, but we may have to have a line of caftans to definitely get a caftan for your experiential book club. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. This captain that you gave me, so do you have like a partnership with them, a promotional?
They are we're sort of working with them a little bit now. And so I always get questions about the caftans. Stay tuned. There's going to be more caftan content and maybe some giveaways and some fun stuff. So yeah, this just happens to be, I was already, well, it's not quite like the hair club for men because that didn't work out for me. But I was a customer before we sort of roped them in for this. But yeah, they're on Instagram and or you can find them online. Kaftko, Kaftko, and they're so fun.
I have to say, so I was texting Stephen right before this. I said, oh my gosh, because I'm in Palm Springs right now. I'm going to drive back across the country with my son, and my air conditioning just broke right before this started. I was like, why should I turn on my air conditioning so not so shiny? And then I was like, thank God I have this captain on because it's really comfortable. It's very breezy.
Right?
So
see, listen, there's certain things about, that we've experienced in this past year that certain paradigm shifts that I hope stay. One is more flex time for workers. Two, more work-life balance. And three is like, let's keep the comfortable clothes. Like, I'm all for the caftans and the sweatpants and all that. Let's keep them. So
Caftan revolution.
Caftan revolution.
So I know we're going to get this question. Maybe it's already, I'll go through and look at the questions. It looks like there are some great questions coming through already. But your book felt like a movie to me. And I wonder, has there been any activity? Do you think it'll become a series or a movie? Can you say anything?
I would love to see that. I can't say anything about that at the moment, but stay tuned, everybody. Stay tuned. I hope to be able to have something to say on that front soon. But yeah, it is, it's a very visual, I think that tone, that heart, and that humor, I would personally love to see it, some adaptation of this. And I hope that it would just bring a whole bigger audience to this and lead them back to discover the book. I mean, that's always my favorite thing about these adaptations, is anything that gets more attention back to the book, I think is a good thing.
Everyone is going to be like, whenever it comes out, they're going to be like, I remember I was on a Zoom with Stephen Rowley and
he was acting weird. He was being non-committal. What? Anyway, hopefully soon.
These Zooms are going to be like when you went to go see a rock show, like with a band that wasn't famous yet, and then they get.
Oh my God! Like seeing Diana Ross in Central Park or something. Like I was on the Zoom when, yeah.
This is that Zoom, guys. So I hope you all feel really important to be on it. I love that.
I don't know about that, but
my favorite scene that I want to see it filmed. Like maybe we should just do a TikTok where we act it out. But I loved it when Patrick stormed into Neil's office. So I don't think I'm giving much away. But there's a scene where Patrick approaches his agent and he just has a bug in his rug and he's like,
that was so Midwest.
You're stuck with the Midwesternness.
Yeah.
It's great for a call for a Milwaukee bookstore. So I'm going to go and see if there are some questions. So for you guys,
please, let's.
Be sure to jump in. So there's a Q&A link that's and there's also the chat. So there's nothing in the Q&A yet. So I'll just go through the, speaking of movies and TV, anything you binged on during 2020?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I just finished it, but Mayor of Easttown was the latest obsession. Love. And that's something that, it feels so much like a novel. That's original to television, the Kate Winslet series on HBO, but it's so rich that it really, I had to go back and look. I was like, wait, was this not based on a novel? Because it really takes its time, and I just found the whole thing to be so incredible. But I was hooked on, I get, I like things that are very different than I write. So I was like, like a lot of people, I got sucked into true crime. I was very into a series on Netflix about the and there's a podcast too. So, but the series on Netflix about the robbery at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which was like 30 years ago, and the biggest art heist ever in the United States or ever. But I just fascinated. I went to school in Boston, and I was there at the museum soon after it happened. Maybe I'm outing myself as a suspect. I don't know, but they still have the frames on the wall, and they cut the the artwork, the Rembrandts and whatnot, out of the frames, and it's haunting. If you ever go, the frames are still empty. Frames are still there.
Well, I'm gonna have to check that one out. I can't even work my remote, so I was watching Mare of Easttown last night, and I was like texting my whole family. I'm like, you guys, what do I press? They're like, you're hopeless. David Jablanowski says, what are some elements of Auntie Mame that you incorporated into your story other than the name Patrick?
Well, so David, thanks for that. Yeah, there are certain hints and shadows. There are a couple. There were a couple of turns of phrases that I did. One was, shake the fruit tree and see what lands. I think that was originally a line from Mame as well. But, I tried to mimic a few of the characters as well. So the throuple was inspired by Vera Charles, who is Mame's best friend. And so they're sort of a mirror of the Vera character. Same as there's a young woman named Cassie in the book who is sort of a mirror of the Gooch character from the Agnes Gooch character from Mame too. So there are these little shadows in there that I had fun playing with. You certainly don't need to know anything about Mame to appreciate the book, but if you do, there's little hints and shadows and things that you can find. So
did you kind of obsess over Auntie Mame? Like, is that how did that stick in your craw enough for you to write a book that's kind of
it's just I don't know, I can't even remember when I discovered it, but it's right from childhood. I love these, my mother, she practically tied me to a chair to watch The Sound of Music, and I was like, I'm not gonna like this movie about and then about nuns, and then I was enchanted. So it's like, and as I said earlier, Mary Poppins, the idea of some sort of magical person blowing in on the wind and lifting you up, and that just that these stories hopefully feel like an embrace, like a hug in a way. And I think as a kid, like I wanted to just imagine being part of these sort of like hijinks was it just seemed like the height of fun to me. So it's always been lived large in my mind.
Stephen, you're like the magical being who blows into writers' lives. You have such a wonderful writing community. You really are. You're so supportive of other writers. I just am so glad I got to say that with an audience, so you can hear that. You're just amazing. Robert Krause has a question. What's your relationship to reviews, either from the legitimate press or the general public via social media outlets?
That's a good question. I mean, I sort of look like this. I'd like to say that I don't look at all. And I don't. I try not to when I'm, it's impossible leading up to publication not to have like one eye, but I sort of let them come from my publicist or from my editor or from my mother or my agent saying it's okay to look at this one or something. While I'm actively writing, I try not to look because listen, like good. And sometimes it happens, like sometimes people will tag you in something, and I don't know why they do that, but they, if it's good, it's fine. I'm happy with it. But and if you don't like my books, that's okay too, but you don't need to tag me in it because it does kind of bum me out sometimes when I'm working. But so you don't want someone to drag you down, but also like it's not good to obsess over the good ones either. It's not, you don't want an inflated a sense of your own self, of your own ability. That's not a good place to come to create art. That's not a good place to work from either. So I try to keep as healthy a distance as I can.
My friend Ann Garvin said something funny about reviews. She said, I love the 3-star ones because you can learn from them. I've talked to other writers about that, and they're like, no.
Well, sometimes they're great, and then it'll be like 3 stars, and you'll be like, wait, what? You just wrote a 5-star review and gave it 3 stars. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like you just need the right book in the right reader's hands. You know, like if the right reader has your book, they'll like it. If it's the wrong reader for it, you know, that's another thing too.
Yeah.
Somebody said, how did you come up? And I love this question because I was curious about it too. How did you come up with Patrick's backstory as a TV actor? This is Gail Warner. Hi, Gail. And were there any TV series that inspired you, as in you imagined Patrick being on?
Yeah. So, well, Patrick's another sort of like a little drawing from Mame, because Patrick was the boy in Mame, and the Patrick in my book is not meant to be the adult version of him. It's not at all. It's just a sort of homage to Mame, is where the name came from. But I wanted to give him a profession. I didn't want him having to work and the realities of supporting a family all of a sudden be on the front burner. I really wanted to isolate sort of these 3 characters together, him and the children, and so sort of to take the financial element out of it allowed me to just focus on the healing. And so I sort of chose something. I was like, well, why would he have a lot of money? And then from there, I did feel like I had a lot of things to say about social media culture and television. And when we were kids, when we were growing up, television was like the greatest thing. I've joked on here before, but my mother told me the saddest day in my life was when I found out that Mr. Rogers wasn't just talking to me. I thought he was just directly communicating with me through the television, and when I found out other people could see him too. But now the kids are obsessed with YouTube in the book, and they don't see the difference between a video on YouTube and something on television, which is what, Patrick holds television in such high esteem. So that was just a lot of fun to play with that. And then in terms of show, he was a star on the fictional show The People Upstairs, which is sort of like a Friends or a Will and Grace, or that last sort of gasp of the show that everybody kind of watched before television got so splintered with streaming and whatnot. Yeah.
And the Ropers, Mrs.
Yeah.
Roper, right?
Mrs. Roper and the Captain Three's Company. Yeah.
One other question, and this is an interesting one to ask because I know your editor's on the call. But how did you structure the book? And was that challenging to you? I was curious, a lot of times as a writer, I read a book thinking of the architecture and how it's built, and not just what the story it's telling. And I was thinking about how it must have been hard to figure out the backstory. Like, how do you weave Sarah back into the story? Sarah's the mother who passes away, and I was curious if you had to edit that a lot, change it, or did the structure just kind of feel like it was organic and it just flowed right out?
It was really hard to find the entry point, and we my editor Sally, hi, we worked hard on that. It was different for me structurally too. This one, my first book, Lily and the Octopus, I was like, okay, it has an octopus, so I knew immediately I would write that book in 8 parts, and each part had an octopus theme, ink or something. And and my next book too, The Editor, was written in 5 parts, and I was able to divide that up, and then it seemed like, oh, I'm writing novellas, they're much more connected than that, but it made it okay, I don't have to sit down and write a novel from page 1, I just have to write this section. And it in a way, like mentally for me, it really helped break it up and then thematically organize the story. This one is just one long hot summer, and I knew immediately, like, dividing it into parts like that wasn't going to work. So it was finding that right entry point, kind of, and then and it really was this journey from page 1 through the end of the book, and it was interesting to do. I think all my books, they're not populated with massive amounts of characters. Hopefully the worlds are very rich, but the number of characters I've always limited to this point, because I really like to focus on the interaction between them.
You also have nice exposition where, like, there's so much action, like it totally clips along. You never feel like it drags at all. So everything's in scene. But then there's also these wonderful moments where you drift into the characters' heads and you kind of get a sense of taking their temperature and what they're thinking. And it's just so masterful. Like, everyone should read this book. I'm really a big fan for it. Yeah, but the structure's hard. I took a workshop with Rick Moody, and he kind of messed up my writing for a while because this is a long time ago, and he said, backstory's dead. Writers shouldn't use backstory at all. It should only move forward. And I did that, but then sometimes you need a little bit of backstory. Like it's good. I don't think he messed up in a bad way. I think I learned from having to think about when I'm using backstory and when to incorporate it.
Yeah, agree 100%. Because if you have too much backstory, you think, well, why didn't you just start the story there if that needed to be part of the story? But yeah, we needed to get a real sense of loss, and to get a sense of loss, it helped to have a sense of who was lost, who is this person they're grieving. And so yeah, I found some necessary, but it was putting it in authentic moments that were triggered by something that happened in the action in the main timeline, and not just throwing it in there randomly.
Well, that's great. So Margot is here. Hi, Margot.
Hi, Margot.
And I feel like I know Margot. We've just met online. Yeah, have you guys met in person?
We have once, yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, the Bucks County Book Festival, I think, in Pennsylvania. I miss festivals, I miss bookstores, I miss being with people in person, so hopefully soon.
Sounds like things are lightening up. But Margot has a great question. Where did you get inspiration for character names? Or what? She said, where, what, or who do you get inspiration for character names?
Oh, that's a good question, because I don't really always understand it. I always watch the credits in films. I'll say that, and I'll pause. And sometimes I'm mixing and matching names. Sometimes, that's a sort of way I find names. Sometimes I'll go to the masthead of a magazine and mix and match names. And sometimes they really, I don't know. Like something will come to me. In Lily and the Octopus, there was a sibling named Meredith, and she's the only sibling that the main character has in the book. But in real life, I have 3 siblings, and so picking a 3-syllable name was a way to sort of secretly honor the 3 people that I had condensed into one. And so sometimes my brain is just working like that. So there's no rhyme or reason to it, but I love naming characters, and I think it's because I don't have children of my own, so I get a chance to it's not exactly exhibiting my taste, because sometimes I have to assign a name to someone that I don't like, because I think it fits who they are.
Have you ever had a character you've written for a while and they're just not coming alive, and then you change the name and suddenly they snap in place?
100%.
Yeah. I love that. I changed the character's name from Mary to Kitty, and like that's a totally different person.
It's a totally different person. I mean, and their birth name may have been Mary, and maybe they called themselves Kitty. It's like all sorts of things.
For all you writers out there, if you're ever struggling with your manuscript, that's actually just a really fun exercise to do. Is just change that character name and see what happens. Laura Bird's on the call. Laura at the library on Instagram. Awesome. And I actually got to meet Laura in person at Mr.
I have not met Laura yet, so thank you for being here, Laura.
You need to come to the Midwest, Stephen.
I really do.
Yeah, this is an invitation, and we will have so much fun. And we will drink old fashioned.
Well, listen, there's a good chance I could be addicted to cheese curds in an hour, in which case I'll be there to pick up some more very soon.
Well, Laura said, I'd love to know where and how you write. Like, are you in front of a laptop in your office, or are you sipping a cold beverage poolside? Do you have music going in the background? If so, what helps put you in the mood? It's a good thing that's said about writing.
Yeah, I'm the most boring person. I write in silence and at a laptop, sometimes at my desk, sometimes at different places throughout the house. But and in the winter in Palm Springs, I'll write outside, because the summer it can be 115 degrees, and I'm not, my laptop wouldn't last 5 minutes outside before the screen shut down from overheating. So I haven't really been shaken. My work hasn't been shaken by the past year, because I wasn't someone who wrote in coffee shops or out in public or anything anyway. I'm too sensitive to environment, and if the wrong song is playing, and I usually don't play music at home, but that can, or if the temperature's wrong, or if someone sits down at the next table and starts a conversation that I get sucked into, like I have to write at home.
It's funny for a lot of writers, the pandemic, like we didn't really notice except there are other people in our space. We're like, okay.
Well, everyone's been living sort of a writer lifestyle now. It's like, at home, don't wear pants, like should I have my fourth cup of coffee or first glass of wine,
See how exciting.
These are our struggles.
So my dear friend Brett Jarvis, who's a Guncle, I'm sure he's like my Guncle now, but he's here in Palm Springs, that's where I met him. But he's on the call, and he said, when I read, I also cast a show or movie. Who do you see playing Patrick?
Oh goodness. Well, to me, it would have to be an out person, just because I'm not saying that straight actors can't play gay roles. Certainly, I want gay actors to play straight roles also. But because this character sort of draws on his lived experience, I really think it has to be an out gay person. And for that, I don't know, Dan Levy is the person of the moment, Schitt's Creek fans, he's, or Billy Eichner, the comedian, somebody who is really prickly on the outside, but not too far underneath as a sort of warm, gooey center.
I love that. I really do. Like, I know you can't, maybe you don't know yet, or you can't say, but
I don't know yet. I literally don't. I'm not sitting on that. I don't know yet. Yeah.
Well, it'll be so exciting. I'm sure that it'll be on screen someday. So it's almost 6 o'clock, our time here in Palm Springs. And this was so much fun. And Stephen, I feel like we were at a party together.
Like, I know this was so fun, and thank you everyone who tuned in, and thank you, Christy. I've had a chance to read Christy's next. Well, first of all, the second home is about to be out in paperback, and I'm fighting with Daniel here over which Christy book but it's about to be out in paperback. It's one of my favorite books from last summer, and it got overlooked a little bit in the pandemic, I'm afraid. And your new book, Shoulder Season, will be out in July, and it's fantastic. And so it also has a Palm Springs element to it. So if you've read about Palm Springs and you want to read more, pre-order Shoulder Season.
And if you pre-order Shoulder Season from Daniel, you'll get a little matchbook to go with it.
Oh, fun!
Drop these off, so when they come out, we'll make sure you get a matchbook. So it's funny. My press sent some of these matchbooks to like young book bloggers, and they're like, "Why do I get matchbooks? Like they just are not familiar with that time, the early.
What do they do?
Sorts, the
What's a matchbook?
Yeah, what is a matchbook? Why would you use that? So, Daniel, thank you so much for hosting this. I always love Boswell.
Thank you for having us. And Daniel, you have signed copies of the Guncle, I think, for sale, correct?
We do. We have these beautiful, beautiful book plates. And
oh, yay. Oh, look, that's my signature right there.
It's yours. It turns out they didn't ask us to fake them. Just a terrific job. Love the little initials on the jacket.
Putnam does such a beautiful, my publisher does such a beautiful
really
job
nice
with
job.
the books. Yeah, the design is perfect. I love the cover. We didn't have a chance to talk about that. I love the cover. It absolutely feels like summer and fun. And so take it to the beach, take it to the pool.
You know what? I feel like when you finish reading it, it's just that cover just makes you smile.
Take it to a lake. Well, we're going to tailor this to Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. River, bathtub, any of these.
A bathtub. Bathtub works in a fish, absolutely.
Thank you so much, both of you. And thanks, everybody, for coming. We wouldn't have a virtual bookstore without you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for supporting independent bookstores. It's been a rough year, and we're so thankful that you're here. But we want you not just to survive, we need you to thrive. So support
one last question.
Bookstores.
If somebody wanted a book with the signature in it or wanted a book personalized, is there a store you're working with that they can ask?
No, not at the moment, but find me on social media, and we will figure it out.
All right. Thank you both so much. Have a great evening, everybody. You've got lots more evening to come because you've got 2 hours on us.
Oh, that's true.
We're only a little jealous.
All right. Well, time for a refill. Christy, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks a lot.